William Longbeard FitzOsbert, often simply referred to as William Longbeard, was a prominent figure in late 12th century London, whose actions and eventual martyrdom marked one of the earliest examples of urban rebellion in medieval England. His story offers a unique lens into the social tensions of the time, highlighting the struggles of the lower classes against political oppression and economic disparity. While his rebellion was short-lived, his role as a populist leader during a time of social upheaval left a lasting impression on London's history. William FitzOsbert was born around the mid-12th century to a prominent family in London. His surname, FitzOsbert, indicates that he was the son of a man named Osbert, though little is known about his early life or his family's specific status. Some sources suggest that FitzOsbert had ties to the gentry or minor nobility, which would have provided him access to education and an understanding of politics. Despite these potential advantages, FitzOsbert became a vocal advocate for the poorer classes, positioning himself as a champion of their grievances against the ruling elites. The nickname Longbeard was given to him because of his distinctive long beard, which he wore as a symbol of rebellion and solidarity with the common people. Beards were often associated with resistance to authority, and FitzOsbert's choice to grow one was a deliberate act of defiance. This seemingly simple physical characteristic would later serve as a rallying point for his supporters and a mark of notoriety in historical accounts. FitzOsbert's rise to prominence occurred during a period of growing tension between the lower classes and the ruling elite in London. The 12th century was a time of increasing urbanization, with the population of London expanding rapidly. As more people flocked to the city in search of work and opportunities, the gap between the wealthy elite and the impoverished masses widened. The city's governance was largely controlled by a small group of wealthy merchants and nobles, who had the power to levy taxes and enforce laws that disproportionately affected the lower classes. The immediate cause of unrest was King Richard's demand for taxes to fund his campaigns in the Crusades. Richard's expensive military expeditions left the crown heavily in debt, and these financial burdens were passed on to the English population. A particularly unpopular tax, the Saladin tithe, a levy to support the crusade, was resented by many Londoners, especially the poorer citizens who bore the brunt of the increased financial pressures. This economic strain laid the groundwork for FitzOsbert's rebellion, as he capitalized on the growing discontent to position himself as a leader of the people. FitzOsbert's rhetoric resonated with the common people, and he quickly gained a following. He spoke passionately against the injustices inflicted upon the poor by the wealthy elites and the clergy, accusing them of exploiting the population through unfair taxation and legal manipulation. He framed his cause as a fight for justice and equality, aligning himself with Christian principles to legitimize his claims. He portrayed himself as a messianic figure, sent to protect the weak from the oppression of the strong. This blend of populism and religious justification was effective in rallying support, particularly among those who felt marginalized by the existing power structures. One of FitzOsbert's most notable actions was leading a large group of disenfranchised Londoners to present their grievances directly to King Richard's brother John, who was serving as regent in Richard's absence. The event took place in 1196 and was significant because it demonstrated the growing organization of the lower classes. While FitzOsbert was able to gain an audience with the regent, his petition was ultimately unsuccessful, as the ruling elite remained unmoved by the demands for tax relief and greater representation for the poor. Nevertheless, this bold act of defiance elevated FitzOsbert's status as a folk hero among the people. FitzOsbert's activism soon drew the ire of the city's elite, who viewed him as a dangerous agitator threatening the social order. In response to his growing influence, the authorities attempted to arrest him, but FitzOsbert fled to Saint-Mary-le-Beau, a church in the heart of London seeking sanctuary. Under medieval law, churches were considered sanctuaries where fugitives could claim protection from arrest. FitzOsbert, however, had become too much of a threat for the authorities to tolerate, and the law of sanctuary was ignored. The final confrontation occurred when forces loyal to the ruling elite set fire to the church, forcing FitzOsbert and his supporters to flee. He was captured after a brief struggle, publicly humiliated, and dragged through the streets of London before being executed in April 1196. His death was brutal. He was hanged, drawn, and quartered, a punishment reserved for traitors. His execution was meant to serve as a warning to others who might be tempted to rise against the established order, but it only cemented his status as a martyr in the eyes of his supporters. Although William Longbeard's rebellion was ultimately crushed, his legacy as an early champion of the oppressed continues. His willingness to confront the elites of London and his efforts to articulate the grievances of the lower classes make him a precursor to later movements advocating for social justice and economic equality. The chronicler Roger of Howden, who documented FitzOsbert's life and death, painted him as a villainous demagogue, an interpretation shared by many of the elite at the time. However, later interpretations, particularly in the 19th and 20th centuries, have re-evaluated FitzOsbert as a proto-revolutionary who was ahead of his time. His rebellion was one of the first instances in English history where the urban poor organized against economic and political injustice, a theme that would recur in events like the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. FitzOsbert's life also sheds light on the broader issues of governance, representation, and class struggle in medieval England. His rebellion illustrates the precarious position of the lower classes and the lengths to which they were willing to go to challenge the inequities imposed by the ruling elite. Furthermore, his use of religious symbolism and populist rhetoric foreshadows similar strategies employed by later social movements throughout history. William Longbeard FitzOsbert's life and career as a populist leader in medieval London offer a fascinating glimpse into the social and political dynamics of the 12th century. His rebellion, though ultimately unsuccessful, stands as an early example of popular resistance against economic injustice and political oppression. His martyrdom and legacy have been the subject of varying interpretations over the centuries, but his significance as a symbol of defiance against the ruling elite remains undisputed. FitzOsbert's story is a reminder of the enduring struggles for justice and equality that continue to shape societies today.